Welcome everybody to IMAGI-NATION TV, and today we're catching up with our designers, and specifically this week we're looking at the theme of forgiveness. And it was so cool catching up with the youngsters yesterday, and that theme running through that we could build a relationship with someone over a whole lifetime, and then if something happened that wasn't seen as right, then we could lose that relationship forever. And we can have these time capsules of all these experiences that we've suddenly boxed up, put a lid on, put a lock on it, and then thrown it out to sea. And in many ways, we've let go that part of our life because we haven't been able to cross that bridge of forgiveness. Today, we're going to reflect on that broad theme and then think about what does it mean as we try and design our future in these current times? Who do we have to forgive to be able to overcome these challenges we've got systemically and move through a fascinating conversation with our panel? So I'm pumped to get into the show today. And as those of you who were watching last Wednesday, you would have seen that we launched a product called This Hoodie Pays Rent. And what we were trying to do was work out, okay, with these current challenges in these current times, how can we not only try and protect the AIME community, but how do we stand up for the wider village that we're a part of, the global system we're a part of? And can we use what we've got to lend a hand to our fellow friends out there? And the way of doing that was creating a hoodie that pays rent. So $30 of every one of these hoodies sold is going to go to a registered hoodie connector. And we've had people starting to apply over the last week, which has been great. From launching the hoodie on the day last Wednesday, we sold, I think, $11,000 worth of hoodies in a day, which was unprecedented for us. It's almost on scale with our biggest product ever. And I think it gives us a chance to talk about what a good tax might look like on products as we move forward. What does it look like to build a more socially balanced economy where we're asking our people creating products for us to really see what social enterprise element is part of their key product that they want us to commit to and be a part of. So we'll come to that a little bit later when we're talking to the designers. We have Thomas joining us today. Thomas, how are you?
Hey, I am good. How are you?
Man. Yeah, I'm going pretty good. Having a good time, catching up with some good people in the middle of the day. It's a nice way to spend lunchtime. Tell us, we got an application from you to be a Hoodie connector. Why did you want to put in an application?
Look, there's a couple of reasons as to why I jumped on board with being a Hoodie connector. So I'm a big supporter of AIME and have been following AIME for a long time. It's stemming almost over 10 years, because I remember, just a little side story here. Also last week you mentioned that you wanted AIME to get like some street cred and stuff like that. So I'm in the performing arts industry. I studied through dance, and one of the earlier jobs I did was I got to perform at the Deadly Awards and at the Opera House, and we all were given AIME hoodies. That was my first hoodie that I got, was performing at the Sydney Opera House, given an AIME hoodie, and I was, ever since then, like, the street cred is been there for a while then, and so ever since that moment I've been wanting to get more involved with AIME to kind of help with these programs. And then I've done I've had one involvement previously with the AIME Can Dance kind of program. But obviously in this interesting, weird, bizarre moment, there's been some moments that have kind of popped up to create some issues for a lot of people. And this is an opportunity that I seen that could help some people, both internally but also externally from my own life. And that's kind of why I thought this was a great opportunity to jump on board, give me something to do. I really think it's a great program. There is help going in multiple directions from it, and that's what kind of really caught my eye.
Oh, nice, man. Well, we're pumped to work with you, and would love to hear the creative ideas as to how you're sharing the love and I suppose giving people the chance to see that how a garment can kickstart a circular economy sideways. And I think at the moment a lot of us are frozen. I know for myself, when I see someone trying to sell a product to me, I feel pretty gross at the moment. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to buy that. Unless you're offering me a way to improve things, then I'm not sure I'm going to engage. So thanks for putting an application in, and all the best with it. And yeah, looking forward to working with you on the front line as we kickstart this new initiative. And we've set ourselves the audacious goal to try and raise $2 million from it. So that's 20,000 hoodies. There's currently 2 million people who've been affected by rent in Australia, 20 million people being affected around the world. And we're getting applications from the United States, from South Africa, from Uganda, from across Australia. And I think, every big idea starts with people putting their hand up and going, yeah, I'm going to do this. And we've had 20, 30 applications in the last week. $10,000 doesn't sound like a lot on the way to $2 million, but the only way you get there is by putting a foot forward again and again and again and going, no, we're going to create change now, because 2 million odd Australians struggling to pay rent, and houses being foreclosed and people being kicked out of their homes is something we've got to stop. And if we can stop that together and mentor kids at the same time, then we will have achieved something really special in one project together. So thanks, Thomas, for joining us, and all the best with it.
Thanks for having me.
All good, bros. Catch you soon. And Christy Greaves, you're on the other side of this application line. You have I assume it's a privilege to be able to work with AIME, and you're there receiving the applications of the Hoodie connectors. What's speaking to you as these applications are coming through, and why do you think this is important for us to work on?
Hi, Jack, and it definitely is a privilege to work with AIME and such an awesome group of people. And going through the Hoodie connector applications has been a very humble experience, in the way of seeing that there are a lot of people out there that are needing help right now. And I feel privileged again to be able to help them and to connect with them as well. So yeah, that's pretty amazing.
And what is it that that makes you get out of bed, Christy, when you want to give your time to helping people? Because what is it that's pushing you to want to see things change?
Oh, really future. Like I have a young toddler, and I'm also auntie to a whole mob of kids. And I want a better world for them when they grow up. And working with AIME and programs like this Hoodie Pays My Rent, to know that they exist and they're being created, gives me hope that, you know, the world's becoming a better place and a more likely opportunity for them for when they grow up.
Thank you, Christy. I couldn't echo those views anymore, and that's why it's a pleasure to work alongside you and work alongside the team. And let's do what we can to raise $2 million for this venture and $1 million to help people pay their rent all around the world as we keep pushing ahead. So good luck on the phone lines as the applications come in hot, and I know that you'll give people like Thomas a lot of support as we try and make this thing really sing. So thank you for dropping in, and we're now going to go into our design section. So we'll go to a quick video and then we'll welcome our guests on our design panel today. Okay, everybody, welcome to our design panel today. And we've got Kunal joining us, Alison and Leila. Kunal, you were so lucky, I think, to receive Hope's Design Award last week. Now, I know that you've, received some awards, the first person under 35 in the biggest thing ever, and you've done it, I don't know, 1 or 2 TED Talks maybe, but surely getting a design award from a puppet named Hope has got to be close to the top of the pops for you.
Yeah, I enjoyed the video a lot. I watched the episode just the next day. I enjoyed it a lot. I sent it to all my cousins to go ahead and watch it. So you watch Nickelodeon, now watch this.
Yeah, awesome, man. Hey, tell us a little bit about your experience with design and give the viewers a little bit of your story who didn't catch last Wednesday's show.
So moreover, briefly around my story. So I started my first company around somewhere where I was 10. From this small city in the center of India called Bhopal. Faced a lot of people who weren't agreeing or who made an effort to go against. But I think that was the fun part of it. And then today, currently, K-Star, one of my companies, is India's largest independent e-commerce provider with more than 100,000 customers across a rural background. That K-Star mainly works on empowering rural sellers to be able to enable a national and international marketplace. So these are sellers who got introduced to the internet in 2018 and 2019. They had no access to the internet before 2018. And we're enabling them to turn the internet into a revenue stream for themselves. So, and apart from that, I run a couple of other stuff. I'm also a best-selling author. I've done a couple of TED Talks here and there. And yeah, that's about it.
Well, a couple of thoughts as we're moving. So the first one is on the sellers and thinking about how we generate these microclimates of people being able to work directly. It'd be great to talk about this Hoodie Pays Rent and see what we might be able to do together on that one. It could be
Definitely.
A really arena.
Definitely.
So let's wrap on that offline. And then, how old are you?
So I'm 16.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, good one. Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us on the show today. We're going to have a great conversation and kick around ideas around forgiveness, around equality, and building a fairer world and what we can do. Alison, tell us a little bit about your story and what brings you on the show today.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me. Well, I have a background in writing. I'm a writer and an editor, and I write specifically about art and fashion. So those are my interest areas. So my day job is I edit a journal called Vault, which is a journal of art and culture that looks at art and culture in Australia and internationally as well. And then I also co-authored a book about art and fashion in the 21st century. So I guess all my interests and areas, the other thing I do, I sit on the board of the National Gallery of Australia, which is actually probably thing I'm most passionate about. My greatest professional achievement, I guess, for me, was to be asked to sit in that capacity, because it is a national collection that belongs to everybody in the country. And all my interests are around art and artists and creatives and how those worlds come together. I guess how creatives collaborate to do amazing things like that hoodie.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I'm fascinated about how we curate an experience, and I'd love to come back to that and try and understand how the heck do you trust yourself to go, yeah, that's going to go in the magazine or that's going to go there. Hey, Leila, thank you for joining us. Tell the people watching a little bit about your story. And
hi, Jack. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My background is, I guess, in economics and accounting and finance, but I ended up in the fashion industry about 15 years ago and worked through many roles in marketing and sales and products. And now I'm the CEO of the Australian Fashion Council, which is the peak body that takes care of the textile and fashion industry in Australia.
Brilliant. Well, what a panel. We've got some great comments coming through from the YouTube chat line. So we've got Katarina saying, what a legend, what a stash. I think moustache for our international watchers, or maybe everyone says stash, I don't know. We've got Brad Witters saying, this Hoodie Pays Rent campaign is a great example of what positivity can be achieved in a time of negativity. Tom Wensley, wow, started his first company at 10. I think that's about you, Kunal. Jeff Beck saying, what a very humble young man. Well done on your achievements. Please keep leading and designing. So we'll keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming for Alison, for Leila, and for Kunal as we move through this conversation. I want to know, how do we think about balancing the power of fashion and art to create change and create a fairer world or a more equal world? Who'd like to take that question?
I'll have a go if you like. I think it's a very interesting world that we're in right now. There's obviously, and Leila would probably know more about this, a bit of a backlash against fast fashion. And I think when we think about fashion, there are two different things. There's fashion and there's clothing. And I think what's really interesting about what you're doing with Hoodie is that it actually blends those two things together really perfectly with a social conscience. So the hoodie has become this cultural icon now. It's something that, you know, streetwear and street clothing is now high fashion, and you see high fashion houses making their versions of street fashion. It used to be the other way around, where high fashion would trickle down to the street, and it's like a crossway, I guess. And the fact that you now have streetwear elevated to high fashion is such a great moment for you guys to be doing this hoodie. And just recently, there was a really major exhibition in Europe about the hoodie, and I think was a very telling moment, because it sort of unpacked the cultural significance of that object. It's something that's a very democratic item of clothing. Almost everybody owns it. And so what does the hoodie say about the person who's wearing it? I'm kind of interested in how we think about those things, and about how clothing is never just kind of a haphazard thing. Most of us do think about what we're putting on in the morning, and why we're putting it on, what purpose it might serve. And the most interesting moments for me right now are in culture, are when you have these collaborations between artists and fashion, where they're trying to do something meaningful that talks to a kind of a more democratic way of life, about the fact that everyone wears a hoodie. So what can you do with a hoodie? Something that everyone is familiar with and has seen before. How can you make that item of clothing be actually a very powerful piece of clothing? I think is really interesting. And that's what interests me so much about what you're doing, and how that you can actually be wearing a political statement all the time. You know, what you're doing is a political gesture through fashion and clothing.
Yeah, it's when we think, Leila, about the role of products in the 21st century. You know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s as sort of globalization really took off, and it was cool if you could get a made in China watch when you were in primary school. People were like, whoa, you got that. Or I remember one of my dad's girlfriends, he didn't have too many girlfriends, but there was a period between his time with my mum and his now current wife. Hi, Dad, if you're watching. And you know, I remember them bringing back from Hong Kong, like a little present from Hong Kong. I was like, wow, Hong Kong. So we've gone through this wave of we can find stuff from everywhere, and then learning more and more about the supply chain. And I'd be fascinated to see if we could evolve out of this current time with some sort of good tax, where social enterprise products become the central part of big brands like Gucci and some of our major fashion leaders, because it's a good thing to do. You know, we sort of carve a little bit off the profit margins, and we all make a little bit less, but maybe that's the way that we can lead with fashion, by instituting some sort of good tax, which I don't know, I think the consumers have a part to play, but it's often on the leaders to build that. How are the conversations in your world of fashion as you're thinking about what does goodness and equality mean when it's connected with a brand and a sale and a profit?
Sure. So many questions, really complex and hard to answer succinctly. But I guess what you're talking about, I mean, to get a good tax into fashion will be an amazing thing, and it's definitely something that I think we need to look at in the future. But before we even get there, we want to make sure that we're paying people wherever they're manufacturing the product a living wage, and that's where we see a lot of inequality happening, or I guess abuse of the developing world. But even locally, and even within the brands that manufacture here, I guess there's this focus on profit ahead of teams' well-being, mental well-being, ahead of looking at the ecology and environment and seeing how that's affecting all of that. So I think absolutely a goodwill tax, a good tax to come out of fashion would be brilliant, but we need to look at the critical kind of resources that we use, which are the planet and people. Are we taking care of these in the industry, within the industry and the ecosystem? Because there's a huge ecosystem from manufacturing all the way to media and hairdressers. It's a massive industry, retail and so on and so forth. So we really have to look at all these elements. But I think also stepping back one extra step and looking at what fashion was supposed to do is supposed to do. And in my opinion, it's an expression of creativity. It's how people express themselves, how they want to appear to others, but to themselves. It's not everyone is very good at artistic, what's considered artistic talent, which is whether you're a drawer, singer, songwriter, or a musician, and so on. So it's a brilliant way of being able to be creative and differentiating yourself as a human, physically and outwardly. I think a lot of that's been taken away by things like trend, fast fashion, and also logo sort of, kind of showing, except if it's a logo like yours, which is for a good cause. I'm very much for this logo that you have on now.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, I did throw about 30 questions at you, so you did very well to navigate all of them. And I think, Kunal, as you look at the world, 16 years old in India, how do we? I often struggle with this idea, and it was part of the challenge I had with AIME at the beginning. When I started at 19, so my family's Aboriginal through mum's side of my family, so Indigenous to Australia, and I'm Aboriginal myself, and then through my family on my dad's side is non-Indigenous, and we can track back my dad's side of my family right through to the settlers coming through, and there's sort of both sides of wealth and equality, and a lot of my family other side that have missed out. And so I thought I'd worked it out when I was 19. I was like, oh, it's easy. You just blame people with power. You're to blame. You've got power. And if you could just change that and give it away, then we could work out how to have a fairer world. And as Leila was just talking about, there's so many different levers and good people who have lived, good lives and worked really hard as much as they can to build what they've built. And all of that web intersects with, this concept of a modern economy that we have. How do we practice forgiveness as we look to create change? How do we practice forgiveness for those who may have done things unknowing or that have created really negative impacts, and bring them on the journey with us? How do we possibly do that?
So something I feel today, business as a concept is something that's probably given rise to everything around us. Even if we look at the building we are sitting in, it only exists because someone started a factory to make a brick. And given that mistakes are very common because knowledge is acquired with time and with development. So very often the biggest thing to do is, something I personally believe in is that every generation, that perfection is the horizon, but every generation needs to try coming a little closer to perfection. And within that, very often there are things that happened wrongly earlier, but the biggest thing is of telling yourself that it's never too late to change anything, and you're never too small to change anything. Like something I've very often seen is ageism, what I like to call it, about specifically for people in a younger age, because today with the internet, age is just literally another factor. because somewhere with the internet, what ideally power to do something used to come in the hands of a human being at around the age of 20 to 25. But now it's tracked back to the day he gets a mobile phone. And given that, with the amount of power that has come in, it's probably also put in a lot more, as in terms of questions. So like maturity is very often not related directly to age. So and it's more related to experience, whatever age it might have started. So there I feel very often when a lot of and forgiveness it would be basically just thinking what's happened in your favor and deciding to. So every advantage is a disadvantage. Every iceberg has a second side, and that's where looking over to the positives and using the positives to probably void out the negatives and take advantage of them too.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I experienced that as a lot when I was younger as well. And I'm still, maybe I'm still a little bit young, but often people going, "Oh, you know, you're in that startup stage, or you're a small enterprise, or you're like," and the competitor in me at the beginning was like, "No, I want to change the whole planet, and why can't I do it now, you know, or yesterday?" And I think, we see that in schools a lot, that teachers of this generation, and right now, there's never been a moment more like this where suddenly the tables are flipped. Kids are natives to technology in this generation, you know, those of us that are lucky enough to have access to the internet. And for teachers suddenly working out how to navigate this new world, it's very much changing the dynamic where before the internet, we had teachers could always hold us captive because they had the textbook and they had the answers at the end of the textbook. And so they had something over us, whereas now that's completely changed. And yeah, it is a fascinating rebalancing moment. And I think whilst we want to avoid ageism for young people, I think for young people, we've got to build an empathetic thread to our older generations who are working and help build a new cultivation of that teacher-student relationship in all fields, not just in school and life. Hey, what questions do you have of each other? Alison, Kunal, Leila?
Well, I was just thinking about how I have questions around this idea of how we move forward in terms of fashion for you, Leila, and also how, you know, when you think about forgiveness, there's a lot of anxiety around fast fashion and clothing and buying, and there's so much anxiety I find myself, you know, trying to make ethical choices, and not just in fashion, just around on everything. And I think sometimes it's almost paralyzing to be a human being because we're so like, am I making the right decision? And so I think, Leila, my question for you is, what would be some practical advice for people who do want to be engaged in fashion or interested in it, and even young people going into the industry? They have anxiety about doing that because there is actually just too much clothing in the world, plain and simple. Too much clothing in the world. There will always be until we just stop making it together. But we can't stop making it, can we?
I don't think we should. The aim is for us to stop making it. I think the aim that anyone you speak to that is passionate about the environment and the issue of overconsumption just wants it tempered, wants a more considered approach to buying and to consuming and making. And I think it all really revolves around the values that we've been taught. And it's so funny. I had this conversation with my parents, and I said, it's funny that a lot of the values you've taught me is about being a good person and, you know, not to lie and all the wonder, take care of each other, all of that. But if you think about it, whenever you talk about success, predominantly you would be talking about someone who has a lot of money and or has a very important job. And so I think the way that a lot of cultures, and in particular in developing worlds, the focus is on success, and success being an accumulation of money, even though so many studies have been done that support the fact that money doesn't give you happiness. And supposedly the whole thing is about looking for happiness, right? And so if I wear this, I'm going to be happier. If I buy this, I'm going to plug this hole of emptiness that I have inside, and so on. And when we use product to plug, I guess, sorry if I'm going a bit deep and dark here, but to plug, you know, soul holes or holes in who are you as a person? What are your values? What do you stand for? Then it never works. It will work. We all know. I've done retail therapy, and sometimes it's brilliant for like a minute, but then it goes away very quickly. So just to bring it back to forgiveness, I think if we recognize that a lot of what's going on is really a result of fear, and that's that it's much easier to forgive when people potentially are making more money and selling more because they're worried about their life changing or not making enough money to make their boss happy or to support their family and so on. So I just think it's really important to go back to basics and look at our values in order to understand this better.
And that then, the funny thing about an economy is it's a concept which we populate with what we value. So if we then say we're going to value all goods that have a good tax on it, or we're going to value all goods that are made in this ethical way, we're going to value all goods that are made from an ethical supply chain, we're going to purchase art from somebody who stands for something in complex ways, and the heroes we then build around that. I think there's a couple of things that fashion can do really fascinatingly in our generation. And one of the things we're pushing for is for the mentor to be seen as a 21st century rock star. Because if you can have knowledge at the center of celebrity, then I think that starts to help us all navigate the complexity of the world that we're around. And, you know, we had sport really significantly off the wave of Nike and Adidas be that really big push in the 80s, 90s, and still today. So that's what fascinates me. You know, people like you, Kunal, I want to hold up and say, this is a hero. And because I know that you're sweating the big ideas and you're trying to learn and you're reading complex things and you're engaging with big ideas. And that means that I think you deserve a stage and deserve airtime and for people to listen to you. And yes, you'll make mistakes, but I want guides in my life who can help me understand the world. So thank you all for taking the time to join us and give us a sample into your worlds and your understanding of the world. Is there anything that you'd like to finish off before we, any final thoughts before we wrap up the conversation? Kunal, maybe to you.
So something I would want to ask. So currently, very often, again with fashion, there's a lot of conventional stuff that comes in, a lot of preconceived notions in context to what's right and what's wrong. Like same thing I've seen with CSR. That CSR, irrespective of what it is, it often has a lot of preconceived notions in it, especially in developing countries where there's a limited amount or a massive amount of corruption to a limit. So given that a lot of conventional preconceived notions come in, as in if it's involved, how correctly it is. So what do you think is the possible way to combat that more in developing economy?
Yeah, I think you've got to intersect. You can't be a charity. You've got to be a business. And if you can do that, if you can bring real value. So when we talk to some of our major corporations, I'm not interested in the CSR budget. I mean, our skill set is behavioural change. We can go and see a university student and change their behaviour in 30 minutes. We can change a kid's behaviour in 30 minutes. Right. We're really good at that. So we can change behaviours for any major corporation who wants to attack the ideas of and build the ideas of imagination into their mainframe, or work on hope, or work on positivity. That's our DNA. So I think part of the challenge for people working in the non-profit sector is to not see yourself as a victim that has to sit and live on handouts, to see yourself as an equal and a peer, and ideally someone who actually can offer insights into that organisation. Because most of the big organisations, they're slow moving and they're maintaining the status quo. All of it, that's why they get big advertising agencies or smaller advertising agencies or people to consult in, because they require those ideas that are generated in the outside world. And the best artists borrow, I think. You know, there's a line in The West Wing which says that, good writers borrow and great writers steal. Those of us that have our antenna up, we get to see all of these different ingredients and kind of mash them together, and that's when we get to create. So that'll be my thought on it. Hey, thank you all for joining us. Would love to follow up and kick around some ideas that we've spoken about today. So yeah, see what we might be able to do together on this Hoodie Pays Rant and explore a good tax for fashion. And I think to Kunal's point, like, it starts with, you're never too small to be able to create change. So if every time we do an episode, we make a commitment to try and create a fairer world together, I think we can do some remarkable things just from this little TV show alone, and then replicate that around the world.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. That was
Thanks a lot for having.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll get back in touch, and thanks for dropping in. And now we're going to go to an interview with a lady named Candice Mumma, and I was lucky to catch up with Candice a couple of years ago in Pretoria, just as we were about to launch the AIME program into Pretoria. And it was a scary moment. The night before meeting Candice, I was sitting there thinking, heck, I'm about to stand in front of predominantly a Black audience in South Africa, in a country which the guy who helped build so much of it in the last 20 years had been my hero. Mandela's story was a story I idolized. And I was trying to work out how I was going to explain that my family's Black, but I have white skin, and that I'm not here to be like another person coming in to try and save the Black people. But I understand what, some of the challenges are. And I think that the AIME mentoring tool could potentially help build on Mandela's legacy and help lift up people and build a bridge between those people with power and those without. And so that happened just after doing the interview with Candice. So it was a big bopper. And then when Candice walked in, man, she told me her story, and I had a bit of background. And I've never, ever, ever been in a room where there's been more pin drop silence. I felt like the whole world stopped for this interview. So it's my pleasure to share with you Candice Mumma and her story on forgiveness. Candice, welcome to AIME TV. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and what's brought you here to AIME TV land?
My story is a story of forgiveness, and it is my father, when I was 9 months old, was killed by an apartheid assassin by the name of Eugene de Kock. And of course, I grew up without a father, and it was very hard on me. But when I was 23, I decided to go meet Eugene in prison, and I forgave him. And I advocated for his parole, which he later got. I was very sickly, and I was stressed out, and I was miserable. And I think at around 16, I decided that I needed to change my life. So when the opportunity came around, when I was 23, to go and see Gene, I think that was like the test. Did I really forgive this person? And I was really nervous, to be honest. I was like, maybe I didn't. What if I see him and I just want to kill him? But we sat down, he ran us through everything. And after everything was said and done, I just thought to myself, you know what? We're two victims looking at each other, and I can't leave this room without telling him I forgive him.
Can you remember his reaction?
Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't only me, it was my whole family who was there, and everyone individually would say, I forgive you, I forgive you. And it got to me, and I said, Eugene, I want to say I forgive you, but before I say that, I want to ask you one question. And he looked at me and he said, okay. And I said, do you forgive yourself? And he looked around and he had a tear in his eye, and he quickly dabbed it. And he said, every time I see a family, that is the one question I hope they never ask me. And he said, when you've done the things I've done, how can you forgive yourself? And I just bawled and cried and cried. And then I said, I forgive you. And he was like, we were all just emotional in the room at that time, and yeah.
Define forgiveness for us.
Forgiveness is letting go of the emotional attachment that you have to a situation. So it's not forgetting it, it's not condoning it. It's just saying, I am no longer controlled by this situation. I'm no longer going to think back on it and be angry and be aggressive and let it trigger me. So it's really letting go of the trigger point that you're attached to a certain event in your life. So that's what forgiveness is to me.
What would you say to, other Black kids on the side of the camera, whether it's in America or Australia or Uganda, who through years and years and years have lost all sense of trust in white people?
It's a hard one. It's really hard one. I think for me, what I did is, and I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but what I personally did was I blamed one person for the actions of that, individual. I didn't attribute everything he did to the entire white race. I said, okay, you lived under a certain system, you were oppressive under that system, you did a really crappy thing under that system. I think it's really important not to look at people as a blanket, just like you don't want to be looked at as just like, I represent all Black people. I don't think it's fair to look at any other race and attribute, the actions of one person to every single person.
What's driving you now?
I think for me, the more people I can touch, and the more people I can just trigger a thought in and just say, you have the power over your life. Not all of us are dealt different cards, and those cards can be awful, but it's what you do. You are responsible for your reaction, and you're responsible for where you go. You know, you can't be imprisoned by one incident. You can't let one thing define your entire life. You know, so if I can do it and I'm not special, then everyone out there can do it too.
Candace, thank you for joining us on AIME TV. You're a champion.
Thank you so
Good on
much.
you. Boom.
I'm so happy to be here.
See you guys. What a
Thanks.
legend.
Okay, I got a hoodie. I got mine last week and it pays rent and it's really great. I got a hoodie. It is so cool. It pays rent and it mentors kids. Hey, I'm Hope. It's great to see you all, everybody. Candice Mama, I love you. Thank you for your passion, your heart, and your integrity. Let's get into this week's Hope's Design Awards. The Future Award this week, well, we were so inspired by Nancy Conrad's keynote that this week we decided to give the Future Award to ballers from the Conrad Challenge. As you all know, I'm always looking out for our environment and ways we can minimise waste. So that's why this week's Hope's Design Award goes to 5 teenagers, 5 of them. And they're from, let me just try and pronounce this properly, Kamnoi Tavita Science Academy in Thailand. And they are Nadabob Ponpalanami, Napat Sayokomat, Nanchi Songswang, Pasavon Limichi Chokche, and Pimchea Chepermasak. And they designed a smart bin, wow, fast drop, which can identify, classify and separate different kinds of trash, therefore improving recycling. That is so cool. Since then, these teens have created Trashless, an organisation to continue to develop their idea and bring the world's first smart bin to life. Waste disposal is a global problem and hopefully these teens have found a global solution. You guys win Hope's Design Awards. Congratulations. You've done fantastic. Hey, let's see what's going on in the chat room. Derek Bland, I'm in awe of all of the AIME hoodie heroes. Thanks for the insight. Yeah, I agree, Derek. Great to see you. Samantha Oliver, rewriting the script on success will shift so many attitudes and industries. Agreed. I agree with you too. Thanks for helping produce this show, Samantha. You and Cy and Margaret are doing a great job helping us, the background crew. Lisa Toolin, agreed. Candace is such a remarkable person. Okay. This hoodie pays rent. I love this hoodie. It is so cool. This hoodie. It's here. It's so good. Okay, I'm back. All right. Oh. The Lifetime Achievement Award goes to, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't gone away. When am I going to come up? This is like peekaboo. Ready? This award goes to Catherine Hamnett. And Catherine is a British designer. Wow, Catherine, fantastic. And she iconised the bold slogan T-shirt of the 1980s. Wow, that's a pretty cool achievement. She founded her namesake label in 1979 and quickly made a mark on the popular culture of the day. Her bold T-shirts designs were worn by George Michael, members of Queen. I love that band. Julia Roberts, Charlie XCX, Deborah Harry and Naomi Campbell. Hamnet met the then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher wearing a dress that protested against Thatcher's politics. Talk about using fashion for good. A truly outspoken artist, Hamnet operates on the philosophy if you want something to get noticed, you splash across a t-shirt. She's spoken on the war in Iraq, Brexit, nuclear weapons, called out support for refugees, improved healthcare, and destigmatising AIDS. Her continual commitment is to reducing the impact the fashion industry has on people and the planet. It is our pleasure and our honour to give this week's Hope Lifetime Achievement Award to Catherine Hamnet. Good on you, Catherine, you're a champion. That's been it from the show today. Head to aimmentoring.com to grab an imagination hoodie or grab your This Hoodie Pays Rent hoodie. Let's get it moving. Let's get rent moving and trust between each other and keep changing this world together as we try and get a mentor into every single kid's home every single day during this crisis and beyond. Thanks for joining us on Imagination TV, guys. Bye.